Picture a deer standing in an open field. A few meters away, a horse is grazing. The deer doesn't move. It barely even looks up. Nearby, a fox trots past, and again, nothing happens. The deer stays calm, almost bored, surrounded by other living things going about their business. Then a human steps into the clearing. Within seconds, the deer's head snaps up. Its body tenses, and before you've even taken a second step, it's gone, vanished into the trees as if you were the most dangerous thing it had ever seen. The same scene plays out with birds. A sparrow can sit on a branch while squirrels scramble below it, while other birds land just a few feet away, while a cat slinks through the grass underneath. It barely flinches, but the moment a person walks into view, it's airborne before you've even noticed it was there. Why? What is it about us, slow, clumsy, often unarmed, frequently just standing there holding a coffee, that makes animals react like we're the most terrifying thing in the forest? To understand this, we first have to understand how an animal's brain decides what counts as dangerous in the first place. Because here's the strange part. Most animals aren't born with a checklist of predators. They're born with a kind of risk calculator, a system that's constantly asking one question over and over every second of their lives. Is this thing about to kill me? That calculation happens incredibly fast, faster than thought, really. When a prey animal detects movement, sound, or shape, its brain runs it through a kind of pattern-matching system built from millions of years of trial and error. Does this shape move like a predator? Does it move in a straight line toward me? Or does it ignore me completely? Is it looking at me? That last one matters more than you'd think. Predators tend to orient toward their target, eyes forward, body angled, moving with intent. Prey animals have learned, generation after generation, that something looking directly at you, walking toward you, is a very different thing from something that's simply passing by. And that brings us to something unsettling. Humans tick almost every box on that checklist, even when we're not trying to. We walk upright, which makes us taller and more visible from a distance. We move in straight, deliberate lines. We often look directly at the animal we're observing, which, to an animal's brain, doesn't read as curious tourist. It reads as predator locking on. But there's something even deeper going on, because animals don't just react to how we move. They react to what we are, or more specifically, to a signature that's almost impossible to hide. Scientists have found that many prey animals can recognize humans from remarkable distances, often before we've even noticed them. Birds will take off seconds before a person comes into view, as if they sensed us coming. Part of this comes down to something we rarely think about: smell. Human scent is chemically unlike almost anything else in most ecosystems. A mix of soap, sweat, fabric, and substances that simply don't occur naturally. To an animal's nose, it's an alarm bell that says something unfamiliar is here, and unfamiliar in the wild usually means dangerous until proven otherwise. So animals can smell us, see us, and recognize the way we move. But none of that fully explains why we'd be scarier than, say, a wolf or a lion, animals that are faster, stronger, and built specifically to kill. This is where things get really interesting, because when researchers actually tested this, comparing how animals respond to the sound of human voices versus the sounds of lions, the results were almost backwards from what you'd expect. In a famous study conducted in South Africa, scientists played recordings near water holes, lion roars, gunshots, dogs barking, and ordinary human conversation. The animals, including species that lions actively hunt, fled from the sound of calm human voices faster and more often than they fled from lions themselves. Let that sink in for a second. Animals that are literally on a lion's daily menu were more afraid of two people chatting than they were of the actual predator that hunts them. So if it's not about strength, or speed, or sharp teeth, what is it? The answer might not be about what humans are. It might be about what humans have done. To understand that, we have to go back, way back, long before guns, before spears, before even fire, to a time when early humans were just another mid-sized primate, not exactly at the top of any food chain. But something changed. Slowly, then suddenly. Humans started using tools, then weapons, then coordinated group hunting, strategies that let a handful of relatively weak, slow individuals bring down animals many times their size and strength. And here's the part that matters. This didn't happen quietly, or in one place. It happened almost everywhere, over tens of thousands of years, as humans spread across the planet. Every time humans arrived somewhere new, the local wildlife had no prior experience with us. We weren't fast, we weren't strong, we didn't look like a threat, and that's exactly why we were so devastating. Animals that had spent millions of years learning to recognize lions, wolves, and crocodiles as dangerous had absolutely no instinct for small, upright creature carrying a sharpened stick. By the time many species figured out that humans were lethal, it was often too late. Entire populations had already been wiped out out before the survivors could pass on a warning. Note, this is one of the leading explanations for what scientists call the naive prey effect, and it's strongly linked to a much darker pattern. In nearly every case where humans arrived in a new region, large animal populations collapsed shortly after. Not because we were the strongest predator, but because we were a new kind of predator, one that didn't play by any of the old rules. Over time, though, something shifted. The animals that survived those encounters weren't necessarily the strongest or fastest. They were the ones that learned fastest to treat humans as something to avoid at all costs. But here's the question that comes next. Is this fear something animals are born with, hardwired into their instincts after thousands of generations? Or is it something each individual animal has to learn for itself? The answer, and it turns out, is both. And the way fear spreads is stranger than you'd expect. In some cases, fear of humans does appear to be at least partly instinctive, especially in species that have had long histories of being hunted. But instinct alone doesn't explain everything, because animals also learn, and they learn fast. Young animals often pick up cues from their parents. A mother deer that bolts at the sight or smell of a human is, without saying a word, teaching her fawn that this is something to run from. Herd animals take this even further. When one animal in a group reacts with alarm, that signal, a snort, a sudden movement, a change in posture, ripples through the entire herd in seconds. Most of the animals never even saw what triggered it. They just learned, instantly, that fear is the correct response. This means fear of humans doesn't have to be experienced firsthand to spread. It can be passed down, copied, and reinforced socially, which is part of why, even in places where humans rarely hunt anymore, the fear response can persist for generations. And some animals don't just learn this lesson, they remember it, individually, for years. Crows are one of the most striking examples. In studies where researchers wore specific masks while trapping and briefly handling wild crows, the birds didn't just remember that mask. They reacted with alarm to it years later, even when worn by a completely different person. More than that, crows that had never personally encountered the dangerous mask still reacted to it with fear, apparently having learned the association from other crows. In other words, some animals aren't just afraid of humans in general. They can recognize specific humans, hold on to that memory for years, and even teach that fear to others who were never there. So, if fear of humans runs this deep, biologically, socially, even individually, why do some animals seem to feel none of it at all? This is where the story takes an unexpected turn. On certain remote islands, places humans only reached relatively recently or never settled at all, animals behave completely differently. Birds that would flee at the sight of a person on the mainland will, on these islands, simply sit there. Some species barely react even when approached closely enough to touch. This phenomenon even has a name: island tameness. And it's not because these animals are friendlier or smarter or somehow special. It's simply that their ancestors never had a reason to learn the lesson. Without generations of deadly encounters to build that fear response, the instinct never had a chance to develop. Or it faded away once the threat disappeared. It's a kind of living fossil record of fear, a snapshot of how animals might have behaved everywhere before humans showed up. But there's an even stranger version of this happening right now. In cities all over the world, pigeons will walk between people's feet. Squirrels in parks will approach within arm's reach. Urban deer in some areas barely react to passing pedestrians at all. This isn't because city animals have lost their fear of humans entirely. Scientists measure this using something called flight initiation distance, basically how close something can get before an animal bolts. And in cities, that distance shrinks dramatically compared to the same species in the wild. What's happening here isn't that the fear disappears, it's that it gets recalibrated. City animals essentially run a constant cost-benefit analysis. Yes, humans are unpredictable, but they're also everywhere. They rarely attack, and there's food, warmth, and shelter nearby. Over time and generations, the threshold for "this is dangerous" quietly shifts. It's the same underlying system, just rewritten by a different set of experiences. And this brings us back to the original mystery, the one we started with. A deer that ignores a horse, a fox, even other predators, but bolts at the sight of a human. Because now we can see what's actually happening. The deer isn't just reacting to what's in front of it. It's reacting to an inherited, reinforced, constantly updated warning system, one shaped by tens of thousands of years of human behavior, passed down through instinct, through social learning, through individual memory, and recalibrated based on every recent encounter. When you really break it down, humans are not the biggest predator on the planet. We're not the fastest. We're nowhere close to the strongest. A grizzly bear could overpower us without effort. A cheetah could outrun us without trying. And yet, across huge parts of the animal kingdom, nothing triggers a faster, more universal escape response than the sight, sound, or smell of a human being. So maybe the real question was never why are animals afraid of us? Maybe the real question is this: what did we do over thousands and thousands of years that taught nearly every living thing on Earth that we were worth running from?